Good day, folks. My name is Jim Worthen. The show is Worthen One-on-One. And out of respect for a great communicator and a guy who started here at Channel 17, Arthur von Wiesenberg, we call him Nipper, who has the Animal Zone, and now it's international. And he said, don't do all that introduction about where they see you and all that. Go right to your guests. And you can put in, and it will be in on the TV, when they can be re-seen, when it can be taped, and where they can go to see it on the internet. So, out of respect for Nipper, Scott Wenz, how are you today?
Doing really good, Mr. Worthen.
Mr. Worthen? Oh, shit.
You know you're in trouble now.
Yeah. I frequently profanitate on TV, and guests who don't know cable say, you can't say that. I said, fuck you. And
No.
and they say, what? And I say, yeah, it's cable.
It sounds like a fire truck.
I say, but that allows you to tell me, Jim, you're full of shit. So feel free. We're going to talk about cab and where it goes. We've done a show in the last month about the 25th anniversary. We did a show in the previous month about the upcoming 25th anniversary. And so we're going to go, where do we go from here?
Well, first off, we'll restart the CAB monthly meetings. We take a break in August. And so in September, the last Wednesday of the month at the Santa Barbara IHOP, we'll restart our meetings. So we're hoping to get a lot of people to show up to discuss what's going on.
Yeah, people don't understand, and you're very good in repeating some of the things that are going on, but you also want to hear what they're facing and what they feel.
Exactly.
Their input.
Yes.
And I think that's been one of your frustrations in the past, is trying to deal with the planners and the bureaucrats. And I understand that you have a new focus, and that's on the citizens.
Yeah, for a long time our focus was the citizens, and then we decided to go on a different bent. So now we're trying to come back because we're getting screams, bloody murder of objection to what's going on in the city of Santa Barbara. It started with the bike paths on Rancheria and some other places, narrowing of streets.
I want to take you back to the thing that's troubled me the most, and it's all about me. And tell me what people 10 years ago who came to Santa Barbara in their car, what the first thing is that they did.
Well, one of the nice things that they would do is they'd take a drive up State Street. They'd get off the freeway down by State Street, Garden, and then they'd go over to State Street and drive up the street. They'd see these nice facades and businesses around and so forth, and they also have great views. And slowly but surely, the city of Santa Barbara is putting in density and high-rise buildings.
Yeah, I have known people who have the pleasure of going the other way.
Yes.
Coming off at Mission Street and going down State Street. And what do they see? You just mentioned the facades.
Well, one of the things they also used to see, and they can't anymore until they get about halfway down State, is they used to be able to see Stearns Wharf and the ocean.
Right.
That was, matter of fact, that was one of the draws at the highest points for the retail businesses to be up around the 900-1000 block of State Street, going all the way up to the 1300 block, because you could look down and see what was there.
It used to be the minute you got by that one high rise, the 4-story California hotel, great pictures of it after the earthquake where the whole facade had fallen off and you could see in all the rooms. They could see the yacht races on Wednesday, Wednesday. They could see speedboats. They could see sailboats. They could see kids on paddle boats. And that's pretty hard today because of our buildups. So historically, we have damage the history of Santa Barbara in that regard. When I had the pleasure, when I was a young aide to an assemblyman, of him taking calls from the saint of Santa Barbara. What was her name? He'd say, "Yes, Pearl."
Yes, and everybody would bow down.
Yeah, Pearl Chase. And in fact, Don McGilvery would put his phone on speaker, set it down, and she would just tell him everything that needed to be done, everything that was wrong, everything that was beautiful. And every once in a while I'd say, "Yes, Miss Chase." He'd just, "Yes, Miss Chase," and then he'd go about shuffling his papers. He was listening to him, but he was able to do two things at once.
Well, and that's part of the problem that CAB has, because we're made up basically of locals. If you haven't been here 10 or 15 years, we consider you a newcomer. So they're destroying the historic legacy of Santa Barbara. And the HLC and the Pearl Chase Foundation basically have been cut out of this.
Yeah, you got more and more concerned about and we'll get to it, what they were doing to the car. But in fact, what you were doing also was trying to protect the history of Santa Barbara.
Right.
Not saying, "I've got to have my car," but this is what Santa Barbara really is.
That's right.
So let's start with infilling. Explain how what we're getting that's destroying that beautiful vista of our city.
Well, it started with Paseo Nuevo. Everybody said we needed a downtown shopping center, so they decided to build the large Macy's building, then what was then also the Nordstrom's building, and they would start infilling high density. And then if you go down on Chapala Street, some of the first high-rise buildings that went in downtown were right down on Chapala Street. So now you have 50-story buildings. Not 50-story, excuse me, 50
high,
foot.
yeah. The last ordinances I saw, and I think it was voted on by the people of Santa Barbara, there was a height limit of 43 feet.
That's right.
And it's crept up by, well, we need a little extra for a
HVAC units.
Yeah, and so it became 45. And now the crazies in the city are building a 58 feet tall police station. Did that ordinance go away, or did they just ignore it?
Well, they used an emergency ordinance because, quite honestly, the police department needs a new headquarters.
Why?
Why? Because they do not have the training facilities. They do not have the changing facilities. They don't have the necessary facilities just for the people that protect the community from crime. And so they need this new facility, but because of the water table.
You've drank the Kool-Aid. They didn't need anything new. They just needed to modernize the station they had and maybe have some outlying stations like they have in Goleta. There's several different police stations, and but they weren't too creative, were they?
Well, yeah, I get the point you're getting at. Is that would have been probably a more cost effective. The question is do you have a coordination?
Well, I'm going to ask you about something where the money comes from and something that we're running into with all these government activities. What's a grant?
A grant. It is the fount of all taxpayer money that flows into politicians' pockets.
No, but where does it come from?
It comes from the taxpayers.
No.
Okay. The grant money generally comes from Sacramento, and Sacramento backfills their need for grant money with a lot of federal money.
Yeah.
So those are the top two providers of grant money.
Oh, you were right. It comes from the taxpayer.
That's right.
But it flows through things that the state and federal government would like to force on local government.
Not only that, but each agency that hands out grants gets money for those grants, and guess what? They get a 10% or they get a 15% to fund their personnel. So a lot of the cost of government is hidden in grants.
So that's how a police department that in a city that hasn't grown, not a variation of 5,000 people in 20-some years, has police employees of 250 people, and how every other bureaucracy, I'm sorry to pick on the police because I respect them, but I respect the guy in uniform, not the bureaucracy, and not the command personnel that tries to feed more bureaucracy, but they don't seem to get more officers. They seem to be losing officers.
Well, yeah, and part of that is just the demographics of what's going on in both the nation and the state. Police officers, when I was growing up, used to be the good guys. I mean, you see, if you were a kid, 5, 6 years old, 10 years old, you saw a police officer, you'd go up and say, "Hi, how you doing?" and all the rest of that stuff. And our family, being a long-term family in town, had a lot of the officers who were friends. Some of them were neighbors.
Yeah.
You know? And
they still are good guys.
Yes.
If you're driving around Santa Barbara and you see a fire truck or an ambulance or a police car and a blue car with a guy with his thumb out like this, yes, like that, that's me.
Yeah.
And they appreciate it.
Well, you know what? I wave at all the black and whites I see on the street.
Yeah.
And sometimes, particularly the newer officers that aren't familiar with it, they can, why did he just wave at me? I'm saying hi, and I'm glad to have you around.
Well, I force it upon them. Everyone I see gets a thumbs up. Not just the police officers, the firemen.
Yes.
The firemen have a better chance to look down and say thank you than a police officer does. And the ambulance people, I'm sure, appreciate it. But they are really our first responders.
Sure.
Next to me and my gun. And no, I don't have a gun. No, it's my son's. But
were you born with that shovel, Jim?
Well, no matter how well we are policed, I don't have a gun. My son does, but I have a baseball bat.
Funny you should mention that. I just showed that to a friend of mine. I have a baseball bat sitting right next to the door.
Yeah.
That was a baseball bat that I had when I was in elementary school.
Folks, if you're using a baseball bat on an intruder, don't aim for the head. You'll go to jail for homicide. The knees. Drop down and take the person's knees out. They'll be immobile till the police do get there. So I've tried to educate,
That's a good traffic item. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I never had to use it, but I'm ready.
Yeah.
Come sneak into my house at night. The city's historical milieu, if you will, is been slowly degraded by the infilling, the forcing on us by Sacramento of more supposedly affordable housing, which is laughable anywhere in the country. It's like $1,500 for a one bedroom is affordable.
Yes.
And of course, it all could have been built without the regulations and BS by government for half the price of building. In fact, there was a study that the cost of a building today is a third land, a third regulations, and then the other 40% the cost of building it.
Yeah.
And it's people don't realize, as prices have gone up, that 30% of that is government regulations.
Well, and this is away from traffic, but if you take a look at the issue of inflation, that has been built into all the building materials. So if you were going to put up a gutter, have a contractor put up a gutter for around $500 to $1,000, isn't going to fly today. The cost of materials alone is what the contract used to be. Then you have the installation on top of that.
Yeah, I one time bet someone that I could go out in Goleta. Now this was 30 years ago. I could go out in Goleta, buy a tract of land that had residential zoning, 10,000 square foot lots, and I could build those houses and sell them for $20,000 and make a profit.
Yeah.
And that's when the houses had already got up to 70,000. And I could prove that I was right if government would just get out of your way. A guy did that in Summerland. He just went and built 7 units on the hillside. Didn't ask for permits or anything. They red tagged him, and no one could live in them for 10 years. But he proved that economically he could build them and have a profit just by ignoring the BS.
Well, and if you go back to the density issue in transportation, they're putting in more density, and they're telling people, by the way, we will not allow you to own an automobile. Well, what do you mean? We won't give you a parking place. So, we build the buildings. There isn't going to be parking in the buildings. So if you want to move into the building, you're not going to have a place to park, and they don't provide on-street parking anymore. They're taking it off.
Well, you're more of a world traveler. I have been not allowed to leave California in about 10 years, and when I did, it was Nevada and Arizona and Utah and Oregon and Washington. But I hear that people in those areas don't each have an individual car. Here, the car's our horse. As we went away from horses, we got cars.
Yeah.
And each guy has his own car. I was a member of the First Presbyterian Church, and I'd love on Sunday morning when families would show up, park their cars, all 4 of them for the 4 people, because after church, the girls were going shopping, the father was going to play golf, the mother was going, it's a different mindset that the government tries to ignore.
It's a population control item, if nothing else. By taking away an individual's right to own an automobile, you take away their right to then get in that automobile and go where they want, when they want. And so what's your option? That option happens to be, guess what? Mass transit. Mass transit has not worked in Southern California. Scott Wiener, an individual that's on the senator for the state of California.
Oh, the communist of San Francisco.
Yep. And
Scott Wiener.
Yes. And anyway, so, he says, we're taking away your right to zone. We're taking away your right to produce based upon natural resources. And we're forcing you not to have automobiles by design. Where does he get the right to tell people that they don't have the right of freedom of travel? Take a look at all these people that come into California. Some of them from Mexico, some of them from other states and so forth. You think they're not going to want an automobile?
Drive by our fields in Ventura and Santa Maria.
Right.
And where you used to see buses that unloaded the field workers, and they, God bless them, worked really hard. And as piece workers, they had a pretty good living, because quickly you'll see a field with 10 cars.
Yeah. No, and that's a very good point, because if you go back to when Salud Carbajal was the first district supervisor, he pushed very hard for vans to take the workers up in the Santa Maria Valley to work and then bring them back again. See, we'll be able to load them all up, we'll take them in, they don't have to drive their cars and so forth and so on. And this is patterned after a plan that had been done up in the San Joaquin Valley. What he failed to mention is that the plan in San Joaquin Valley failed to attract enough workers, and doggone it, the same thing happened in Santa Maria. The worker said, well, that's a nice van, but I may want to go shopping after work. And they ignored the vans. Yeah. This county of Santa Barbara spent $1 million for approximately 2 years for the vans. And the individuals that were supposed to use them said, no, we want our own automobile, we want to have freedom of travel.
Yeah, it's, and I'm sure it's different in New Jersey and maybe even Illinois, the part of, it really is Illinois, Cook County and the north part of that state. Illinois is south of Cook County. And I'm sure in the agricultural area, it's the same as in Santa Maria.
Yeah.
I think our planners in Washington don't understand that the core urban areas are not like the rest of the country.
That's right.
The rest of the country is rural, semi-urban,
yep.
And when people get away from the core, they want to build houses. They would like to have 1 to 5 acres. They don't want less than 10,000 square feet because they want gardens. They want animals. And it's been a real trap for some of our minorities.
I found it interesting. There was a report that came out of, I guess, about 5 years ago now, stating that the millennials, the new generation after 2000, these are the people that are going to be changing. They're going to want to live in smaller units. They're going to want to live in apartments. They're not going to want to have the automobiles.
Walk everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. The 15-minute city, right?
Yeah.
Well, the 15-minute city failed the millennials. The millennials decided, oh, by the way, I'm now married. We want to have kids. Maybe we ought to have a yard for the kids.
Yeah.
And the majority of the millennials said, Sacramento, Washington, count them, 1, 2, 3. And this is what we're going to do. And they went into the suburban areas. And now what you're seeing is that the baby boomers, people like me and people like yourself, we may not be around 10, 15 years from now. Well, that's going to free...
I plan to be. Yeah, speak for yourself.
Yeah, well, I would love to be. But the point is that these places are starting to free up. The houses and the yards are starting to free up. It's slowly happening. But the, quote, constraint upon housing is going to turn on a glutton housing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about cars. Again, the communist in San Francisco, Scott Wiener, that's his name, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. They came to the wonderful idea that there was no single-family zoning.
That's right.
And so, we're a capitalist society. When they told you on your Goleta 8,000, 10,000 square foot lot that you could add a unit or convert a garage, why not? Particularly if you were a couple that the kids had left, you could have a tenant and your mortgages had been paid down enough that you had income from the tenant. So, but cars, what happened?
Where do you park them?
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, and these, I saw an item on PBS the other day. Well, you have to understand, people are going for smaller units, and the housing sizes are coming down, and and in fact, part of that's true.
Yeah.
But why?
Well, and they're coming down from 2,500 square feet to 1,700.
Well, and the problem is not because they don't want the size of the housing, not that they don't want to have a garage for their car and so forth, but because the inflation is just jamming people up badly.
Yeah.
So if you can only afford a mortgage plus X, which is at 7%, you're not going to buy a house that's 2,000 square feet.
Sticking with cars, we have a new phenomenon. First, cars are becoming more expensive.
Yes.
COVID caused part of that. And that's kind of stabilized in cars and used cars, except from the car that's being forced on us that I call the dinosaur, and that's the electric vehicle.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting that the current administration in Sacramento and the current administration in Washington has basically done its best to force people to buy a different type of car. And they've done it by eliminating, through regulatory pressure, the cars that used to cost $20,000, $25,000. An average working individual could afford that car. They can't afford the $45,000 to $100,000 cars now. What does that do? Well, if you can't afford the car, then you're going to buy used cars. And if you can't afford the used car, then you're being forced into mass transit, which is another control of the people. People don't want to ride buses for the most part.
Yeah, I think at the Democrat Labor Day picnic, one of the legislators or city council or supervisors was talked about, I think, cars on fire. And so, cars have always caught on fire. You'll see them, and granted, you'd see a car catch on fire by the side of the road and it would burn up if it was full of fuel. And so the firemen will put it out. Well, the firemen have a problem of sorts.
Yeah, it has to do with the lithium-ion battery. And by the way, lithium.
Oh, from China. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, and it was quite interesting. Just in the county of Santa Barbara, there was like 40, 50 all-electric automobiles that failed because the batteries went bad. And for whatever reason. The batteries don't like, by the way, rain. They don't like a lot of wetness. And so that's where a lot of those cars went out of commission. And the insurance companies turned around and said, we're scrapping them. There's no way that we can afford to do the insurance on those. So if you have cars that break down and they don't like wet weather and they're toxic to produce the batteries, now you start wondering. Let me do a quick shift to California Air Pollution Control District. The state of California said in 1999 that if the state of California did nothing more, 100% of the air pollution by 2010 as measured in 1960 in Southern California would be eliminated. And they were absolutely 100% correct.
Building cleaner and cleaner
and
fuel, gas, and
gasoline
diesel.
filled, and they were clean. And you go around and you take a look. If you take a look at the air pollution that used to come out of the LA basin, it's no longer there.
Yeah.
And the majority of the cars there are, guess what? Gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah, I call the electric car the dinosaur because I think in 20 years, as the ones that have been sold with government subsidies in the last 5 years and the next 5 years are going to wear out, and there will be no way to, you've got a car that was a beautiful classic built in the 50s or 40s. 60s. Gee, that was a long time ago. You're not going to have electric cars that are running 20, 30, 40 years.
I have a very close friend who has a gasoline-driven car. It's a very nice car. It's one of those that was built right. I mean, it's tough. And when the computer goes bad on it, the car's down. And so they have to take it in, and she just had a bunch of stuff done on it. They had to reboot the entire computer. So they pulled the computer out of the car, did the fixes on it, put the computer back in. Some of the air pollution issues with the computer weren't working properly, so they had to take it out again, put a brand new computer in, not fix the one. And so you're having real problems.
A little rock in the windshield used to be $200 to replace the windshield, but with all the electronics, and this isn't evil, it's just all the electronics, it costs over $2,000 to replace a windshield, because 500 of it is reprogramming the windshield.
And the airbags that go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully this phase of electronic cars will be gone. Elon Musk, I think, realizes it, because boy, has he diversified.
Yeah.
SpaceX, X, the internet. He's still making money on Teslas,
Right.
more in China than here, and I wish he would ship more to them. We'd like to give them more trouble. And so even the guru of electronic vehicles, I think it's obvious that his actions realizes that there's going to be a change.
Well, and let's go back to the cost. The anti-car people want you out of a car. And if you're not going to get out of a car, then if you take a look at the average Tesla, the average Tesla, not the full 400 range sedan Tesla, that's a small car. And they want you to charge it in your house. Has anybody bothered to take a look at the cost of electricity? The cap and trade that Sacramento is ripping off from the businesses, and the businesses then pass that along to their customers. So the customer is the average individual. They're paying for cap and trade. Cap and trade is now giving you subsidies for electric vehicles, and you have a problem with them.
I haven't talked to an owner of a full electric vehicle like a Tesla or one of the ones that General Motors and Ford and Nissan have forced to sell by giving big subsidies. Where do the subsidies come from?
The taxpayer.
Oh, you mean I'm paying for his Tesla?
Exactly.
You welfare recipients. Anyway, what happens if they get stuck in a real bad traffic jam?
Well, the car continues to operate.
Yeah.
And so the battery has a tendency to run down. And here's another problem. The full-size Tesla weighs 5,000 pounds. That's more than the average pickup truck. The long-range pickup trucks that are being produced by Ford and other are now closer to 10,000 pounds. What is going to be the wear and tear on the streets? I mean, these people
they pay through the gas tax weight. That's the new problem. They want to, and it'll become a way of seizing everybody's car, but now they want a usage tax because electric cars aren't paying a gas tax.
That's right.
But
That's right.
the usage tax will be on
Every
mileage
car.
of every car.
That's right.
Oh, how will they know? Because they'll have a computer in your car telling you how far you've driven.
Yep.
Will it tell where you've driven?
It'll have a GPS and everything else. Yeah.
Oh, so they're following me?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but that potential is there. Yes.
They can.
You know. And so what is the average middle class worker going to do? What is the average low income worker who's working hard, making a living for his family? How are they going to be able to afford this? Do you think the guys that are working on framing of housing, working as mechanics, working as yard repair people, do you think they're going to load all that into mass transit? Not going to happen.
They're having enough trouble with the price of fuel. Oh, that's because government has restricted the production of gas and diesel.
Right.
And so we've beaten up on the government enough and on electric vehicles enough. We could do a show on each of them. We've talked about history. Let's talk about the latest brainchild in the last, I guess, really 10 years. It's accelerated of the government planners. That's the person who wants to control your life.
Right.
Street calming.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I love is a thing called Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a concept that says if you take every car, take it down to 10 miles, 15 miles an hour at the most, if the person gets hit by an automobile, there will be very little damage to the individual. Well, that's fine, but guess what? Vision Zero has in fact increased the number of pedestrian versus vehicle accidents, and that was reported in the LA Times, who did a response. They went through the city of Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles is far ahead of the city of Santa Barbara. And they put in a 10-year program. They narrowed streets down. They did everything they could to slow down traffic, and the number of serious accidents, pedestrian accidents, went up. So since 2010 to now, with Vision Zero, the pedestrian versus vehicle accidents have gone up. They have not worked in keeping the accidents down.
Well, I have a bone of contention about bicycle lanes. The one that's one of the worst is Haley Street. I have seen at least 3 or 4 times as many people on bicycles on Haley Street going the wrong way.
Yeah, well,
you don't expect the bicycle to be coming at you, particularly if you're making a turn. The bicyclists aren't policed.
How about the bicycle lane that isn't used? Let's talk about Coda Street. Now, the Bicycle Coalition under Ed France promoted this loop concept. We'll have the people on Haley going back to the east side. We have people coming out of the east side 1 block away on Coda Street going into downtown Santa Barbara. On the average day, you can shoot a cannon down the Coda Street bike path and you wouldn't hit anybody because they're not there. Well, you know, the individual I just discussed who was head of the Bicycle Coalition that pushed it retired from the Bicycle Coalition because guess what? He wasn't being able to prove that he was working, making it work. Where does he work as a second job? He works as a planner for the city of Santa Barbara. So you have people like Snedden and Harmon and Oscar Gutierrez.
You told me you wouldn't get dirty talking.
But you have these council members, and they're going ahead with narrowing of streets and making life difficult, and they have nothing to prove it, yet this is what we're going to do. And who's promoting it? You have staffers within the city of Santa Barbara who, if they had an ounce of integrity, would be raising up and going into the council chamber saying, no, this isn't right.
Well, I think I told you, and I will admit to my audience, I just failed my DMV driver's test. The paper one, it isn't paper, you do it on a screen. I maintained from the answers that I was more conservative than the code. You know, the code would say you have 1,000 feet to turn on your lights, and I said 200 feet, and I was wrong. And so I'm learning. Well, they still treat bicycles like the DMV thinks they should be.
Like
they're
pedal
going
power,
the
yeah.
same way as a car.
Yeah.
They have the same right of way, even in a bike lane. If you turn through a bike lane, you have to watch for the bicycle coming just like you would a car. And it's kind of a dual attitude. These motorbikes, they say that they're limited to 15 to 20 miles an hour, which a good bicyclist can go even faster than that. But like a good bicyclist, they need to be in the highway lane. They need to be going with traffic if they're going over 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But they're cautioning people to look around for these new modern bicycles.
Yeah, and that's a real problem, because you can see kids. I mean, and when I say kids, we're talking about 12, 13-year-old kids riding bicycles that are doing 20 to 30 miles an hour in a bike lane going down the street. And guess what? If the car driver's doing 30 miles an hour, which is the speed limit on many streets, and he doesn't see a very narrow silhouette bike that is doing 30 miles an hour, that could be a disaster.
That's why there's more cars deaths are either pedestrians or bicyclists than people in a car in California. And it's, again, rules of the road, and the visual problem that a driver has. They found that with motorcycles. A driver in a car doesn't see a motorcycle.
Reason I gave up my motorcycle.
And he doesn't see a pedestrian who's not where he's supposed to be, and certainly doesn't see a bicycle. I have to give kudos. There's quite a few kids in Santa Barbara who have big wheels. I think there's electrically supplemented bicycles, because you see them every once in a while pedaling, and most of them aren't in bike lanes. They're the rule of the road.
Well, and I would say that's dangerous as well. And the thing that's bothering me is, where is the outrage? CAB gets emails, we get comments from our members all the time. People walk up to us and say, this has to stop. But you can't seem to get these people to get into the ear of the councils. People are going to be running for office soon. There's another election coming up. Are you going to elect an individual who shuts down State Street, shuts down parades? Are you going to continue to allow a person to be in office that takes Gillespie over on the west side to one direction?
Well, I was going to give you, in our last 15 minutes, idiot's choice. Not you're not the idiot. These are plans of idiots, and you can take it in any order you want: bulbouts, roundabouts, narrowing, and parklets.
Okay, let's do roundabouts first.
Okay.
The federal government stated well over 20 years ago that roundabouts on urban streets with peak hours of traffic are bad ideas, and they were right. All you have to do is go down on Carpinteria and Milpa Street and see how it doesn't work. Let's talk about the cost of roundabouts. The roundabout at Cliff Drive in Las Positas, the city of Santa Barbara said when they first started planning for it, they weren't going to spend more than $650,000 on that intersection. They spent $4.3 million on a roundabout that was supposed to be 2 lanes and is only 1 lane.
Now, where is this?
Cliff Drive in Las Positas.
Cliff Drive in Las
Positas.
Positas.
Where the bike path ends right in the middle of the roundabout.
I used to be frustrated whenever there was more than 2 cars stopped at the stop signs. And, it took, if it was a lady, it took an extra 3 or 4 minutes to get through the stop sign.
So let's go on to bulbouts. These are curb extensions to make the street narrower. The idea is
they come out. They're really a walkway into the street.
That's right. So it used to cost $50,000 pre-COVID for a street corner that had no drain. Well, with the cost of materials and the increase of cost of contracting, which is almost 40% now, those $50,000 corners are now closer to $75,000 to $100,000. And let me give you an example. Over on Sola and Garden Street in Santa Barbara, they put in 2 6-foot bulbouts. This is part of a St. Francis traffic plan that was put in over a decade ago. The St. Francis traffic plan was pushed by Ralph Fertig and the Bicycle Coalition way back then. It has not increased bicycle usage. It has not increased pedestrian usage. It has made it dangerous to take turns on the streets that have bulb outs. And guess what? On Garden and Sola Street, they have a fire station 2 blocks away that has now been hampered. Yet the HLC, the Historic Landmarks Committee for the city of Santa Barbara, that is supposed to be able to say, this isn't part of historic Santa Barbara, has been cut off at the knees by people that, like the councilwoman that's on the HLC committee. She hasn't reported out to the HLC or to the council what was been going on a complete basis. She picks and chooses.
Well, I'm always concerned when I'm going down like De La Guerra or De La Guerra is the one that really bothers me. And I see a bicyclist and he or she is going 15, 20 miles an hour in the traffic lane, and that's great, and I'm looking to see if I can pass, or I'll just follow till they give me some room. And all of a sudden, a bulb out, and they jerk from being would be next to me to in front of me.
Well, that exact item happened last Monday. I was going up Garden Street at 5 o'clock. There was what appeared to be a Hispanic worker on a pedal bike, not on an e-bike, going up Garden Street. He comes up to Garden and Sola. There's a car right here, just like this, okay? Now all of a sudden he's forced out there. He's within 6 inches of the automobile because the city has intentionally created a hazard on the street, a city that says we want more bicyclists, which means either the council members are lying or they don't understand what's going on. And the people should be angry about this.
Used to be that bicycle usage, when I say used to be, I'm not going to go back in ancient history, but 15, 20 years ago, bicycle usage was mainly workers who hadn't built up enough money and to own a car, and teenagers who were supposed to a pretty short distance to junior high or high school. No sane parent was letting their child ride a bicycle to an elementary school that was 6 or 8 blocks away. So it was that group. I think the workers have bought cars, and I think the kids at high school age and junior high school age are demanding a ride.
Well, you're absolutely right, which means the population pool is down. Yet, according to the statistics, pedestrian and bicycle accidents are up. But you have to parse that. This is a report from 2010 that is very narrow. Well, guess what? If the bicycle paths were working, if the walking paths and the bulb outs were working, those numbers should be down. Yet you get the anti-car people, literally they get beat on desks. They talk to people. They go to council meetings and say, we have to stop this. Well, we have. We built your $14 million bike path on Las Positas. We built your multi-million-dollar bike path on Modoc. We built your, they've done everything. Narrowing the Delavina, Goleta's getting ready to narrow Old Town Hollister. If these statistics were true, then the numbers and accidents should be down, and they're not. So somebody's lying to somebody.
A problem with bicycles is Cabrillo Boulevard. You mentioned Las Positas. Many bicycle paths are multi-use paths. In other words, there's, depending on where you are, they're sharing that with pedestrians, people walking, and they are at a different speed than a 85-year-old woman with a cane.
Right.
And so I see real danger, and I've seen collisions, and luckily I don't know of any deaths, but it's really dangerous. So you get out to Modoc, and there's not as many people walking, and how about horses?
Well, look, Jim, you brought up another issue. The county of Santa Barbara just said and voted to do a bike path along Modoc from Hollister down to where the city starts, okay? And they're going to have to, there's a preserve in there, they're going to have to buy part of the preserve. There was outrage, you can't take the trees out, and so forth. How about the statistics proving that there's demand? Greg Hart, as a 2nd District supervisor, said, we have demand out there. Guess what, Buckwheat? We have cab members that live on Modoc right at that location, and they say you're lucky if in an hour during rush hour you get 10 bicyclists along there.
Yeah.
So Greg Hart didn't know what he was talking about. Now you have Laura Capps, who voted for the same thing. You have the Board of Supervisors who said, yes, we have to go ahead and do this. Why?
Yeah.
The numbers don't back it up, and the people are outraged, but they don't know where to go.
2 issues that we don't want to miss are what's being done to Old Town Goleta.
Yes.
And parklets and State Street.
Yes. Parklets on State Street that pay $1 a square foot when they are paying, the restaurants are paying as much as $10 a square foot indoors.
They used to pay nothing.
Yes.
Now $1 a square foot is supposed to cover cleanup, but it doesn't.
And the original proposal was to charge them $5 a square foot, but people on the council said, oh no, we have to have vibrancy in downtown. Well, if you have vibrancy in downtown, it means you have automobiles.
Yeah.
Now, the arts community, Victoria, Arlington, and other locations, Granada and so forth, are up in arms because the people that patronize the arts community want an open State Street. They want to be able to drive up to the theater, get out and do it, and so forth.
There's a real controversy at the Granada because the people at the Granada want them to take out the barricade that keeps people from going up State Street at the corner of Anapamu. And I don't know who the idiots are in planning who says why. It's because these people need to be able to get out of their car right in front.
That's right.
They need either to let Dad go park or valets. And
look, let's give credit. City staff said on Victoria, take out the parklets. Take out all the barriers, return Victoria to two-way traffic. Now, because most of the closing of State Street is nothing more than ballards that are in the street. Take out the ballards. They have approximately 3 years before this new reimagining of State Street comes along. You have now a 3-year period to open State Street back up. Does retail come back? Does more restaurants come back? Does more of the arts community come back? Because if it does, it maybe costs you $10,000 to open State Street back up.
I knew there was a problem with the legalization of wacky weed and psychedelics because obviously the people doing these plans are high.
Yes.
They don't know what's going on. They're not in touch with reality. 4 minutes, Goleta.
Okay. Goleta has voted to narrow down Old Town Hollister to 2 lanes. Okay?
Wait. I drive that.
Yes.
And people pull over and let people out to the Mexican restaurant or Goodwill or the plumber.
Because traffic can go around them because they have 2 lanes each direction. Here's the problem. Goleta's own staff said, specifically, and CAB was at that meeting where they said, this is a primary alternative artery for 101 when it gets closed down. And sure enough, 2 or 3 times, 101 has been shut down since they voted for this. And they're going ahead and doing it anyway.
Well, 101 shut down to a good driver every day with some sort of construction or
Right,
an accident, and so there's even signs that say take alternate route, and so you're going to get to a point that, well, they'll have to take out the parking.
Look, the bottom line again is this: bicycle will be our alternative transportation, okay? Perotti, Kyriakos, Wright, Kern, all created, guess what? A Brown Act violation in November because they had an outreach program.
You're talking about the Goleta City Council.
The city council, they went
You're
in.
again using vulgar language.
Okay, they met at the community center without notifying that the council was going to meet there. That's a Brown Act, that's a violation of the state of California code. That's number one. Number two, at that community outreach, both Kyriakos and Perotti and Wright stated that they would be doing a bike count on Hollister to prove that there is demand. CAB did the bike count for them approximately 6 months earlier and had 14 people in 2 hours.
14 people on bicycles.
Both directions.
In 2 hours.
In 2 hours, okay? And that's in the morning from 7 to 9.
Yeah.
They never did do the official bike count. And you know, you look at what the city of Goleta is doing and you have to question. They want to put in roundabouts on either side of Ward Memorial, the 217, to increase the flow of traffic on Hollister. At the same time, they're going to take Hollister down to 2 lanes.
Out in Goleta,
What are you doing?
Out in Goleta, being I live out that way, the most bicyclists I see is like after 3:30 to 5:30, and it's Dad and one of his kids riding a bicycle. The dad came home, let's go for a ride. And they're very careful and they
Sure.
honor the road. I've got a minute. Another problem with bicycles is riding on the sidewalks.
Oh, yeah,
we
yeah,
need
yeah.
law enforcement.
Well, you see, the problem with enforcing bicyclists on sidewalks is if the kids see the cops coming to bust them, they'll cut off into an alleyway, they'll cut off on a side street, and it's very difficult for the police to enforce
Yeah.
that.
But most of them now wave at the cop and keep riding on the sidewalk.
You know, and now that we're talking about cops again real quick, I'd just like to say to Charlie's son, Aaron, hi.
Say again?
Charlie's son, Aaron, and that's an insider.
Yeah.
Hello, because I like Aaron a lot, and I loved his dad. So.
Well, we've got to struggle ahead and getting common sense into the traffic patterns and protecting them, because nobody's going to take the cars away. Nobody's going to tell people
They're trying.
Yeah, but they just won't. It's it isn't like the day that the car was replaced by buggy whip.